to the Minister, and call Diana Armstrong.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question 1.
With the Speaker's permission, I will answer questions 1 and 10 together. The Department of Health was provided with a resource DEL budget of £7.7 billion in 2024-25. In addition, the Department also received a further £479 million during in-year exercises. The 2025-26 draft budget proposes a resource budget of £8.4 billion for the Department of Health. This is an increase of £672 million, or 8.7% compared to the 2024-25 non-ring-fenced resource DEL opening baseline. The financial package that accompanied the restoration of the Executive included £34 million specifically for health waiting lists in 2024-25. This was provided as a ring-fenced allocation. Similar funding was not provided by the financial package for 2025-26. In order to provide the Health Minister with the maximum flexibility in managing his budget, I have not proposed further ring-fencing of funding for waiting lists or care packages in 2024-25 or 25-26. Whilst this is something that could be considered as part of the final budget following the consultation exercise, this would either require ring-fencing part of the current budget proposed for the Department of Health, reducing the flexibility available to the Health Minister, or reducing other departments' budget allocations.
Diana Armstrong.
I thank the Minister for her response. She will be aware, however, that the most recent allocation of £7 million in January monitoring fell short even on the allocation needed to deliver pay parity for our health workers. Does the Minister accept that there is an inconsistency in the Executive seemingly prioritising tackling waiting lists within the programme for government, whilst actively deciding not to even partially meet the waiting list initiative bids that were submitted in 2024-25?
Minister.
In the most recent allocation for the January monitoring round, the Department of Health made a bid of £1.5 million in relation to waiting lists. As the member will very likely be aware, we only had £15 million resource DEL to allocate in January monitoring round, and some of that had to go for other pressures in other departments. So the allocation that was made to the Health Minister was allocated for pay waiting lists and other pressures for the Health Minister to make decisions in relation to how he wanted to spend his budget, as he is obviously best placed to do that. So I don't feel that it is a contradiction in terms for the Executive to have a set of priorities that we are collectively committed to delivering on, and it will be for each Minister within their department to take decisions to prioritise against those objectives, and as an Executive collectively for us to agree our budget and to try and ensure that it is done through the lens of the programme for government, but it is also for individual ministers within their departments to prioritise the items within the programme for government.
Speaker, this is becoming ridiculous. We are told that in order to save our health service we have to transform, but yet we have a health minister that says that he doesn't have enough money to do his day-to-day business, never mind undertake transformation. You are the Finance Minister. What are you going to do about it? Are we going to leave people for a generation to languish on waiting lists?
Minister.
Well, I think that as an Executive collectively we have set a set of priorities and objectives, but individual ministers do have responsibilities in terms of delivering on those as well. And I am quite sure that every minister within the Executive, if they were talking about their budget, would be able to say that they are not in a position to deliver everything that they would want to do on a day-to-day basis, while also balancing that against transformation. It is one of the reasons why I continue to make the case in relation to the Executive being properly funded on its according to its level of need, and I'm continuing to make the case that we need to revisit our level of need so that we have the maximum funding available for us as an Executive. But undoubtedly there are decisions that individual ministers and the Executive collectively, working with all members in this chamber, will have to take in terms of transformation and improving productivity and efficiencies within each and every single department. And that is something collectively, certainly I can say as an Executive, that we are committed to doing.
Ms Kimmins.
Minister for her answers so far, and despite what others may say, I think it's very clear that health has been prioritised at every opportunity. So can the Minister then outline to me how that will be prioritised in this draft budget, particularly given that it will lead to, I suppose, other departments not getting what they want, but because we have committed to prioritising health?
And I think there is no doubt that our health service is under immense pressure. Every single one of us in here will be aware of the implications of that through our own constituency offices. And I think it's important that we do all recognise the incredible job that our health workers are doing in the most challenging of circumstances. But I agree with the member. I do believe that the Executive has prioritised health, and that is reflected in the fact that the Department of Health receives over 50% of the total resource DEL funding available. The draft 25-26 budget provides just under £8.4 billion for the health's non-ring-fenced resource DEL baseline, which, as I indicated in my opening answer, is an increase of £672 million, or 8.7% compared to 24-25 opening baseline. And I recognise that even with this additional funding, it will still be challenging. But I also think it's important to cite the many other areas that we need to invest in, including health, childcare, homelessness, education and justice initiatives, and all of those have a role to play in terms of health outcomes as well. As the Health Minister has recognised himself, there are many competing challenges, and we do have a finite amount of funding available to us. Increase in funding for health means less funding for other services which also contribute to health. And I suppose it's also important to reflect upon the budget that has been allocated to health over the past number of years. It has grown slowly and inexorably over time. The draft 25-26 budget outcome will actually see an increase in terms of the resource DEL baseline of over £2.6 billion since 2020-2021, which is equivalent to 45.7%. That's obviously something that's very difficult to sustain in the longer term, particularly when outcomes haven't been improving in tandem with that. Allocations obviously
Minister,
are agreed by
your
executive
time
members.
Patsy McLone.
Case number 3, Guramaga.
I have met with the DAERA Minister on several occasions since becoming Finance Minister to discuss funding for his department, including in respect of the issues at Loughney. In addition, the Executive has met collectively to discuss budget challenges, including in November 2024, prior to agreeing the draft 25-26 budget, during which all ministers had an opportunity to highlight their key budget pressures. Minister Muir has also shared the Loughney Action Plan with the Executive in July, which was discussed and agreed at that point. The protection of Loughney and the surrounding environment is a key priority reflected in the draft programme for government. Despite significant financial challenges being faced, I was pleased that the Executive agreed to allocate to DAERA 1.5 million resource DEL and 1.6 million capital DEL in June monitoring to support actions relating to Loughney. And an earmarked capital allocation of £12.7 million has been made to DAERA to support just transition as part of the draft 25-26 budget. I understand that among the projects that this will support will be one that relates to the sustainable use of livestock slurry, which aims to reduce excess nutrients, particularly phosphorus, entering into the agri-food system.
Mr. Malone.
Guramaga Aster Agra, thank you for your response. Minister, could you advise me, please, what collaboration or coordination is going on between the likes of the departments and indeed the Executive to help rectify issues emanating from Department of Infrastructure, sewage disposal works, and what support has been aligned or given to that department to attempt to address those major issues?
Minister.
Yeah, and I can assure the member that those engagements are ongoing between individual ministers and also as an executive as a whole. And in terms of supporting the actions in relation to, for example, NI Water, additional funding has been made available to the Department for Infrastructure, and there is a collective understanding of the need to do that, both from the perspective of investing in our wastewater infrastructure, but also from an environmental perspective. I don't have figures in front of me in relation to those allocations at the minute, but I can assure the member that it is something that as an executive we take incredibly seriously.
John Buckley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Quite often when we talk about Lough Neagh in this place, it's through the environmental lens, and whilst important, it's often used as a stick to beat the rural farming community. Many farmers within my constituency in Upper Bann has had their land destroyed for many years with flooding associated with Lough Neagh, largely due to dredging issues from the Department for Infrastructure. So can the Minister ensure that any additional funding allocated towards Lough Neagh takes into account value for money and that farming is also included in the wider discussion?
Mr.
Yeah, and I can assure the member that balancing the interests and recognising the importance of our farming and agricultural community in respect of dealing with some of these challenges and the really important role that they do play in supporting actions to protect our environment is something that the Executive is very alive to and has been part of the discussions. Obviously, we do have the Lough Neagh Action Plan, which has been agreed by the Executive, and there are a number of initiatives under that which will be taken forward. But I think that balancing those interests is going to be really key, and I think that it is important that we do reflect upon the role that our farming and agri-food community play, particularly in terms of our economy.
Nicola Brogan.
Thank the Minister for her answers. Can the Minister outline how the 2025-26 budget is going to support agricultural funding?
Minister.
Well, as the member will be aware, and all members will be aware, Treasury removed the ring fence of funding towards our agri-food and farming funding in 25-26 as part of the spending review. I was keen to see that appropriate funding would be provided to farming communities, and therefore I recommended that an earmarked allocation of £332.5 million was provided to DAERA for farming and fisheries support payments. I hope that this important support will continue to be earmarked in future budget exercises to ensure that appropriate funding is provided to this important sector, and that was something that the Executive collectively supported. I also proposed that a capital allocation of £12.3 million for Just Transition to provide further support to the farming sector.
Owen Tennyson.
Speaker, and thank you, Minister, for those answers. Minister, you referenced NI Water in your response and the fact that wastewater infrastructure contributes to the blue-green algae issues that we see in Lough Neagh. Do you share the Minister for Infrastructure's assessment that the funding model for NI Water is sustainable and fit for purpose?
Well, I think the Infrastructure Minister is well on record, and I listened to him responding to a number of questions in the Chamber yesterday in relation to NI Water's funding model, and I have to say I concur with the perspective of the Infrastructure Minister in terms of wanting to ensure that NI Water is kept in public ownership and that there are no domestic water charges, and unfortunately other funding models do not support that particular perspective.
Middleton. Mr. Speaker. Minister.
With the Speaker's permission, I will answer questions 3 and 14 together. I have been engaging with businesses from a wide range of sectors, including those in the hospitality sector, and have listened to the cost pressures that they are facing. I too am concerned about the planned changes to national insurance contributions coming in April, and have written to the British Government on the need for support or mitigations to ease the impacts. I have also commissioned Ulster University's Economic Policy Centre to carry out an independent sectoral study into the cost of doing business here. A terms of reference for the research has been published on my department's website. This research, which will include an assessment of the impact across sectors, will allow me to present as strong a case as possible to the British Treasury on this matter. In addition, my department, through Land and Property Services, offers a wide range of support schemes, providing £275 million of support to business ratepayers, alongside offering alternative payment options to assist those who need it with rating debt, and where 65% of the hospitality industry as a whole is in receipt of support via the Small Business Rate Relief Scheme. I have also written to executive colleagues to encourage them to ensure their departments and arm's-length bodies are doing everything they can to improve prompt payment performance to businesses. Rest assured that I will do all that I can to press for the needs of the hospitality industry to be addressed.
Mr. Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank the Minister for her answer. Minister, recent reports have indicated that there has been a record jump in the number of UK businesses in critical financial stress, according to insolvency specialists. Minister, businesses are in dire need of support and are feeling that they're taxed to death. When will this report be published and when will it be completed? And most importantly, when will we see proactive steps to support our business community?
And I thank the member for that question. One of the things that I was very exercised about when commissioning that research is that we would have it in a timely manner, and it's really important that we have the evidence base to inform the spending review, which is scheduled for June. So the piece of research will be concluded in a report to me by the end of March. And I would encourage anybody out there who is affected and who wants to participate in that research to do so. And the links and the contact information will be on the Department of Finance website.
Stephen Dunn.
Mr. Speaker, and thank the Minister for her answer. And I do welcome the research being provided and on the review as well of the small business rates relief. However, for some it'll take some time, obviously, before these reach their conclusions, and for some it'll be too little, too late. What further assurances can the Minister provide to business owners in my constituency who have had to lay off staff, and what support can be provided? And also, can you please let us know if you will accept my recent invitation to meet with members of the hospitality sector within my own constituency? Thank you. And
I thank the member for his question and also for the invite, which is currently being considered by officials. And in respect of the issues facing businesses, it is something that I have had representations made to me by both business representative bodies, but also individual businesses. There's clearly a lot of pressure from the cost of doing business crisis, inflationary increases across a whole range of things, from insurance to energy to costs of goods and services. So there are a lot of pressures on businesses, and it was important that we have an understanding of what those pressures are and any particular impacts that businesses here in the north are feeling that are differentiated, I suppose, from those in Britain or in the south, and that we are in a position then to be able to make a case that is specific to here and businesses, perhaps even in individual sectors here. I met with the hospitality sector last week, and one of the key issues that they were raising was in relation to VAT, and that there is going to be that increased differential between north and south in coming months, which will make it competitively less advantageous here in the north for some of those businesses. So that is something that I have committed to engaging with the British Treasury on.
Padraig Largate.
Thank the Minister for her answers so far. Minister, what steps have you taken to lobby the British Chancellor to support businesses who have been impacted by the increases in national insurance contributions?
Minister.
Well, I have written to the Chief Secretary to the Treasury in relation to employers' national insurance contributions. As I have indicated to others, I have received significant representation on that issue, both from businesses but also from the community and voluntary sector. And we, as a public sector, are going to face particular pressures in relation to that as well. And clearly, such a significant decision that was taken by the British Government in relation to a reserve taxation measure is not something that the Executive has the ability to mitigate against, and therefore the case that I have made to the Treasury is they need to meet the costs in full for the public sector, and that they should put in place mitigations for those in the community and voluntary sector and our small businesses, and particularly those in the community and voluntary sector who are delivering public services on behalf or in partnership with us as a public sector.
Colin Crawford.
And I thank the Minister for her answers thus far. Minister, although already partially answered already, can I ask what proposals you have around reducing the burden on our SME sector in light of the FSB calls to support our economy? Thank you.
And I thank the member for that question. And I suppose the key initiative that we have taken is commissioning that piece of research so that we have a full understanding of what the impacts are, and then any interventions that we can make to support businesses, they are fully informed. But more importantly, that we are able to make that case to the British Treasury in relation to the impact that the decisions that they are making are having on our small and medium businesses. And like, we are a small business economy, and we know how many people are employed by all of those small businesses in all of our constituencies, and the impact that this is going to have is going to be hugely significant.
David Honeyford.
Minister, can the Minister give us an update just on the strategic review of rates, but then when can business expect to see changes to the non-domestic rates coming through?
So the announcement that I made before Christmas, and I suppose we have the domestic rating measures that we are looking at, but also the non-domestic rating measures. So the consultation in relation to the domestic rating measures will be launched imminently. And in relation to the non-domestic measures, so this year we have said that we are going to look at small business rate relief, and I think that's particularly timely in terms of the conversations that we are having here today, but also look at the rate relief for vacant properties. And what I'm really keen to do in that particular issue is to look at regeneration alongside that, and how we can do those two things together if there are any changes to be made to the vacant property rating reliefs, which I think that there is merit in doing so. So the work to go on to inform those two consultations is ongoing, and we will be launching those after the start of the financial year.
Matthew O'Toole.
Question 4, Mr. Speaker.
So the draft budget for 2025-26 was agreed by the Executive on the 19th of December, with a 12-week public consultation launched on the same day. The public spending position, as the member will know, remains very challenging for 2025-26 in terms of both resource and capital spending. Despite the challenges facing us, the draft budget demonstrates the Executive's commitment to doing what matters most. It will deliver and prioritise additional investment in our public services and an economy that supports businesses to improve the lives of workers, families and communities. And I would encourage people to have their say and to contribute to my department's overarching consultation, which ends on the 13th of March.
Mr. O'Toole.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Minister, you've just said that a consultation, in the previous question, consultation on rates will begin in the new financial year, but in the budget 25-26, it hasn't been said clearly enough yet in this chamber, there's a rates increase for businesses. There's going to be a 3% increase in rates, in the regional rate for business. Isn't it a bit disingenuous for us to come in here and talk about how serious the issue facing businesses while we are slipping through a regional rates increase in the non-domestic rate, and has it been agreed by your executive colleagues?
So I don't think that I would characterise it as slipping it through, because it was very clearly stated in both the ministerial statement that was published on the 19th of December and all of the budget documentation thereafter. And what it actually says is the budget 25-26, the draft budget 25-26 is predicated on those rates increases. What we have tried to do, and what we tried to do this year, was to look at where inflation is at and to try and stay in some line with that. And I'm very conscious of the pressures on businesses, and the member will be aware of the 5% increase that was proposed on domestic properties as well, and the differential was in recognition of the particular challenges that we have had representations made to us in respect of the cost of doing business. But the member will be aware, as will everybody else in this chamber, about the huge pressure that is on our own budget as an executive, and our ability, as many have commented on already in the course of this question time, our ability to deliver public services and the expectation of those public services of being good quality for all of the people that we represent. And that's the balance that we are trying to face here, or trying to achieve here, in relation to how we actually balance that budget and where the burden falls. And I am trying as best as possible to ensure that it falls on the shoulders of those who are most able to meet it.
Cathy Mason.
Minister, as you've outlined, despite the pressures that you are facing, really welcome the support and the priority that you have given to childcare, which has allowed for the development of the very much needed first steps that we've seen. Can you outline how the 25-26 budget will also support childcare?
Minister.
So the 25 or 20, as in this year, 24-25, the executive had allocated £25 million for proposals brought forward by the Childcare Affordability Task and Finish Group. The draft budget 2025-26 proposes that there is £50 million earmarked for childcare, which doubles the funding provided in 2024-25. The executive also agreed, as part of the draft budget, that a further £5 million would be provided for childcare in the first in-year monitoring round for 25-26, and that will meet the Education Minister's full request for £55 million. I think, in light of the significant financial pressures facing the executive, these allocations clearly demonstrate our commitment to supporting hard-working families here, and also the childcare is one of the priorities in the draft programme for government, so it clearly contributes to that as well.
Paula Bradshaw. Minister.
The General Register Office within my department provides guidance to registrars in looking for the signs of possible forced marriage and reporting those to the appropriate authorities. This is part of a multi-agency approach to the prevention of forced marriage that operates across all sectors and involves agencies both within and outside government, including the PSNI, the courts, health trusts, schools and others. Action to prevent forced marriages is coordinated by the Forced Marriage Unit, a joint Home Office and Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office sponsored body. My department has previously inputted on legislative change to combat forced marriage and has worked with colleagues in the Department of Justice and others on this important issue through, for example, the development of guidance. During 2024, my department has developed policy on raising the minimum age of marriage from 16 to 18. This is in recognition that some child marriages can be forced. The Executive has agreed to include provisions in the forthcoming Marriage and Civil Partnership Bill that will extend the offence of forced marriage to anyone attempting to arrange the marriage of a person aged under 18. I hope to bring that bill to the Assembly for consideration in coming months, and I believe the relevant provisions will provide another important protection against forced marriage.
Paula Bradshaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Minister. I'm really pleased to hear that. As you know, in the annual statement from the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission, they talked about bringing this legislation forward, so I have nothing to add other than to say I look forward to that coming forward. Thank you.
Right, well, that's not really a question, so Emma Sheeran.
Minister, can you outline how the budget supports ending violence against women and girls?
Yes, and I think all of us realise what an important issue that is to address. Ending all forms of violence, abuse and harm against women and girls is one of the most pressing issues facing our society today. The Executive is committed to tackling this important issue. In March 2021, the Executive acknowledged the need for a departmental, cross-cutting, government-wide approach to tackle the issue of violence against women and girls. The Executive Office has subsequently been developing a strategic framework to achieve society-wide transformation that is needed to achieve this executive priority. The draft budget for 25-26 includes an earmarked allocation of £2 million to TEO towards the implementation of Phase 1 of their delivery plan. In addition to this earmarked allocation for TEO has set aside a further £1.2 million from its baseline to fund an Ending Violence Against Women and Girls Change Fund for community and voluntary sector organisations and a partnership with local councils. As part of this wider Change Fund, a Regional Change Fund initiative was announced on the 21st of January by the First Minister and Deputy First Minister, aimed at tackling violence against women and girls. And I would think, just in response to Paula Bradshaw, that the legislation that we are bringing forward is an important part of that effort in terms of challenging violence against women and girls and bringing it to an end.
David Brooks.
Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
So I am keen to see this scheme taken forward as quickly as possible to give bereaved families the opportunity to have formal recognition of their loss. I want all parents and families who have suffered the devastating loss of a baby to feel that their grief is recognised. Primary legislation is currently being drafted, which will be the start of the process to establish a scheme here. I hope to introduce the Death, Stillbirth and Baby Loss Bill into the Assembly in the next number of weeks. We will continue to work with the Department of Health to specify the detail of this important initiative, to make sure that it meets the needs and expectations of the bereaved families and to scope delivery options. My officials continue to progress work on this at pace, and a more detailed schedule will be made available when this legislation has been considered by the Assembly.
We have no further time for follow-up questions, so we move to topical questions. Call Matthew O'Toole.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Minister, some weeks ago, in evidence to the Finance Committee, one of your officials said that a long-term scoping exercise looking at 5-year budgeting plans was happening by your department. Today, we hear from NISRA that by 2027, the end of this mandate, the number of pensioners will outnumber the number of young people. Will you be providing a multi-year budget that will help us look at those long-term challenges, and if so, when?
And I thank the member for the question, and I know he will be aware that one of the things that we committed to in the budget sustainability plan was when there are multi-year spending reviews that we will also do multi-year budgets alongside that, and he will also be aware that the legislation precludes us from doing a multi-year budget outside of those circumstances. So we are expecting a spending review in June, which will be for 2 years, and we have the preparations in place to respond and to do likewise and to have a 2-year budget in the first instance, and then the Labour government have said that they intend to review that every 2 years and to look forward on a 3-year basis. So that's the basis that I'm planning on, and I'm very keen that the work that is being undertaken in respect of the departmental plans will help inform that budgeting process and give us the ability to take that slightly longer term look at things.
Mr. O'Toole.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Minister, I welcome the fact that you are looking at this, but I am concerned that we look like we're being imprisoned by the strict legal limitations that are imposed on us by London. You and I want a new constitutional future. If we listen to what the Treasury said, we wouldn't be planning for that future. So can I ask, even if the legislation prevents you from actually providing a legal budget, it doesn't stop you and it doesn't stop the Executive from providing a 5-year indicative budget for what will be needed to deliver the public services for the population we will have in 28, 29 and beyond. So can we have that budget even if it's just indicative?
So the departmental plans will have a forecast of what the departmental needs, and that will help us inform the budgeting process. So in that respect, we will be able to take that longer term look at things. But in terms of actually having an understanding of what our funding envelope is and being able to align that with our priorities, we are unfortunately tied to those spending review periods. But I do think that it is really important that that work is done so that we are able to plan to deliver high quality public services and to support a strong and thriving economy where everybody can prosper.
Erskine.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the Minister for her answers today. It feels quite crass to talk about this whenever people are still trying to get power restored and people have no water right now, but I want to ask the Finance Minister what support she has requested from the UK Government in terms of financial support to the Executive.
Minister.
So I had the opportunity to speak with the Secretary of State on Saturday, and we discussed the impact that the storm was still having, and quite rightly, as you says, there's a lot of people still without power and still without water, and we're very conscious of that and the hardship that many are continuing to face, and we are continuing to engage with partners to do everything possible to rectify that. And I think it's important that we all put on record our gratitude to our frontline workers, both who worked through the storm and who are now responding to it. I know the First and Deputy First Minister met with the Prime Minister and senior British ministers on Saturday as well to ask for that assistance and mutual aid to support people affected by the storm. Departments have begun to indicate that there are potential need for financial support, and work has been commissioned to scope what recovery efforts are expected to look like and what should be included in any ask that is being made, any specific ask that is being made in relation to financial support.
I thank the Minister and I thank her for her clarification there that there has been asks to the Government, and I suppose in the days and weeks that lie ahead we will see an actual figure in relation to that, and I, like herself, put on record my thanks to the frontline workers. Obviously I'm aware of people counting the cost. There are businesses, local businesses, counting the cost through loss of food and things like that. So will there be any financial support for the likes of those local businesses that are on the ground counting the cost of this storm.
Minister.
Yeah, and that's something obviously we're beginning to receive more and more representations about the actual impact that is being felt, especially as power stays off for a longer period of time. So again, it's trying to get an understanding of what those impacts are. And I've had concerns raised with me in relation to the likelihood or otherwise of insurance covering some of those impacts. So we need to have a full understanding of all of that, and the kind of representations then that we will make once we have a full understanding of what the financial costs are going to be. And I will be engaging with the Secretary of State later today again, and have been in correspondence with the Chief Secretary of the Treasury on this issue as well.
David Honeyford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for the answers on rate relief and business rates earlier on. But just to take that on a little bit, does the Minister have any plans for a banded rating system within the 10-year strategic review of rates?
So in relation to the rate relief, we have set out our intention to look at every single rate relief measure over a 10-year period, so that we are making sure that everything that we are spending money on is still delivering on its policy objective and it's still fit for purpose. And in relation to the ones that we are looking at this year, we have representations made to us in respect of banded rate reliefs and other, I suppose, sectoral rate relief, even within the rate relief measures that we have. We have some limitations in terms of the type of rate relief support that we can put in place, and as the member will understand, we actually levy 2 taxes in one with our rating system, in terms of having the regional rate and then the local region, or the local council rate as well. So there are challenges in respect of what we can do, but we are going to look at all of those things as part of the review.
Mr. Honeyford.
Thank you again, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for your detailed answer there. I'm just thinking a little bit ahead. There's the research you talked about earlier, the research happening. Is this something the cost of doing business research within the universities doing and other places are doing that could look at this as a potential opportunity to help our small businesses in the long term?
And the piece of research that we commissioned was, I guess, a response to the representations that were being made in respect of the British Chancellor's autumn statement and some of the particular measures there. But I anticipate that we will get a lot of really useful information, and I know that when we were commissioning that piece of research, the Department for Economy were particularly interested in respect of some of their strategic objectives in terms of the economic vision, and I know that they are likewise looking at if there is potential research that will support initiatives that could support businesses that would be a follow-up piece of research to what is being undertaken currently.
Pat Sheehan.
Can the Minister tell us what progress has been made on the interim fiscal framework?
So, as the member will know, the interim fiscal framework provides new funding arrangements based around a new needs-based factor of 124%. That has resulted in an additional £431.4 million in funding through the Barnett formula for the Executive over this financial year and next. In addition to helping to stabilise our funding, my department recently published the Executive's Budget Sustainability Plan and established the Interim Public Sector Transformation Board to assess proposals for the £235 million ring-fenced transformation funding. Other commitments to be met in the near term included agreeing the mechanism of how the 124 needs-based factor will operate going forward, agreeing the relative funding per head methodology, and developing an evidence base for a higher level of need than 124%. And my officials are in discussions with the British Treasury on both the relative funding per head methodology and the mechanisms for need-based funding. The funding mechanism must, as a minimum, be implemented in a way that ensures the North is funded at least at our level of need, and in my view it would be unjustifiable for the British Government to recognise that the North has a level of need and then to provide funding below that level.
What work has been done to develop an evidence base for negotiating a higher needs level?
So So my department is working to develop that evidence base to demonstrate that the level of need is higher than 124, and to have that evidence base in place to support the upcoming spending review for 26-27. And I'm pleased that Professor Jerry Holtham, who is highly respected and led the Holtham Commission in Wales, has agreed to conduct an independent review on the North's level of need. Professor Holtham is a renowned expert in the field of public finances, and he chaired the Independent Commission on Funding and Finance for Wales, otherwise known as the Holtham Commission, which devised the Holtham approach to needs-based funding for Wales. His unique experience and technical expertise in this field means that he is one of only a few limited individuals who would be able to carry out this work. Officials are also working closely with colleagues in the Departments of Justice and Health to inform the evidence. The Department of Justice are engaging with independent experts to inform their evidence. It's a difficult task, and the final product will need to bring all of these strands of work together to provide a coherent argument as to why our need level could be higher. It's essential that the Executive, as I have already said, is funded to enable it to be able to deliver sustainable public services, and to do that we need to be funded at least our appropriate level of need.
Minister, you earlier referred to budget sustainability. Could you outline the work that's been progressed on that, please?
Since the publication of the Executive's Budget Sustainability Plan at the beginning of October, my officials have continued to progress the work to deliver the key commitments contained within the plan. When it comes to public finances, our aim is to secure and maintain long-term fiscal sustainability alongside efficient and transparent allocation of resources. We will do this by improving our budget processes and developing comprehensive longer-term departmental sustainability plans. I have published a budget improvement plan roadmap that puts in place a series of measures to improve the overall budget process and sets out both short-term actions and areas to be developed over the longer term. This includes actions to more closely link budgets with the programme for government and undertaking a strategic review of income generation measures. I have also recently published a roadmap covering both short-term actions and key activities over the medium term, which will facilitate departments in progressing the development of their 5-year financial sustainability plans, with the intent that these will be in place this calendar year. I know there's no disagreement between our executive here and the British Government regarding the target of 113 million in terms of revenue raising. Could you outline how we plan to meet that target without putting further pressure on working families and small businesses locally? Yes, and the member is quite right, because the £113 million is a condition of the financial package in relation to the write-off of £559 million of overspends that were accrued while the Executive was being underfunded, and it's our view there should therefore have been no conditions. Income generation, in my view, must be done in a way that fosters economic growth and minimises negative impacts on our society. It is a careful balance to get right, as I was discussing earlier in relation to rating, for example, to be able to sustain our public finances and grow income in a way that limits any potential negative impact on households and businesses, but also protects the most vulnerable in our society. In relation to the £113 million target, the timeframe in which to do this meant that the development and agreement of new income generation policies and associated legislation would not have had time to progress through the Assembly to meet the deadline. Given the limited fiscal levers available to the Executive, the alternative would have meant raising rates on homes and businesses by 15%, and that was something that was absolutely not acceptable to me. It is important to emphasise that under my approach, the latest income generation forecast is currently £129.7 million compared to the £113 million target.
Harvey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister will be aware of the operation of 4 Cash Access UK banking hubs across Northern Ireland, including within my constituency. Has the Minister engaged with Cash Access and the major banks operating here to further develop the benefit of additional hubs in towns elsewhere in Northern Ireland with ever diminishing banking services?
Sure.
And I thank the member for that question. I hosted a banking roundtable event on the 20th of November, and we had a wide range of stakeholders there, including Cash Access. The Financial Conduct Authority Chief Executive was also there, and representatives from the banking industry, from trade unions, business bodies, and the community and voluntary organisations, and the Consumer Council was also present. The meeting provided a really useful platform to discuss key issues and developments around access to cash and banking services impacting communities here, and I encourage local communities or individuals to consider making access to cash requests directly to Link under its community request scheme if they have access to cash concerns in their local areas. Details that can be found about that on the Link website. These community requests have resulted in 5 banking hubs being opened here in the north, with a further one announced for Ballynahinch, and I intend visiting the Warren Point banking hub next month to better understand the services on offer and how well it's working for the local community there.
That concludes questions to the Minister. We move to the next item of business, and that's to approve a draft statutory instrument. I'll ask the Clerk to read the motion.
That the draft Greenhouse Gas Emissions Trading Scheme Amendment Order 2025 be approved.
Thank you.